Okay, so you've probably heard these terms thrown around: data warehouse, data lake, lakehouse. They sound kind of similar, but they're way more than just buzzwords. These are basically the blueprints that companies use to manage their most valuable asset, which is, of course, their data. And believe me, businesses are making huge multi-million-dollar decisions based on these systems. So getting what they are and why they matter, yeah, that's pretty crucial. All right, let's get into it. You know that feeling when you log into Netflix and it just gets you? It's almost creepy how well it knows what you're in the mood for. Well, spoiler alert, it's not magic. It all boils down to how they handle just mountains and mountains of information. We're talking everything from what you watch, what you don't watch, to even the nitty-gritty technical stuff like streaming quality. And that magic behind your next binge watch? It's powered by one of these very data architectures we're about to unpack. So here's the game plan. We're basically going to follow the story of how we got from A to B to C in the world of data. We'll kick things off with the OG, the data warehouse. Then we'll see what happened when big data crashed the party, leading to the data lake. We'll look at the headaches of trying to use both at the same time, which, trust me, was a thing. And then we'll get to the new kid on the block, the lakehouse, and wrap up with how you actually pick the right tool for the job. All right, first up, the original, the data warehouse. This really is the foundation of what we call business intelligence. So what is a data warehouse? The best way to think about it is like a super organized library. Seriously, before any piece of information, any book, gets put on the shelf, it has to be cleaned up, structured perfectly, and cataloged. Everything has its place. And because it's so tidy, it's absolutely perfect for creating those reliable business reports, tracking metrics, the stuff that managers need to make big decisions. And this idea has been around for a while. We're talking back to the 1980s. A guy named Bill Inman, who's basically known as the father of the data warehouse, nailed the definition. It's a system built specifically to help management make decisions. Simple as that. And even today, for things that need to be super consistent and structured, like financial reports or sales numbers, the data warehouse is still the go-to. Okay, so if the warehouse is the big central library, then a data mart, that's like a special curated section just for one topic. It's a smaller piece of the main warehouse built for a specific team. So the sales department might have its own data mart with just their numbers, and the finance team has theirs. It just makes everything way faster and more focused for them.
Right, so for a long time, the data warehouse was king. It was perfect for the neat, tidy world of structured data. But then, the internet happened, and suddenly companies were getting hit with this absolute tsunami of new data. And this data was messy, it was unstructured, it was coming in at a crazy speed. Our perfect, organized library? Yeah, it just wasn't built to handle that kind of chaos.
And that massive challenge brings us to the next chapter in our story, the data lake, or what I like to call the everything store. This was the attempt to tame that flood of big data. You can really see the problem here. On the one hand, you've got this beautiful, clean, structured data in neat rows and columns. That's the warehouse's happy place. But on the other hand, you have all this modern, messy stuff. Think social media posts, videos, audio clips, data from sensors. The warehouse just chokes on that. It wasn't designed for it. So a completely different way of thinking was needed. Yeah, this quote pretty much nails it. A vast digital dumping ground. It's such a perfect image, right? So if the warehouse is the neat library, the data lake is like a giant reservoir or a massive storage locker. You can just throw everything in there. Raw data, structured data, weird data, it doesn't matter. You just dump it in its original format and worry about it later.
Okay, this chart gets to the heart of the difference. It's all about when you decide on the structure. With a warehouse, it's schema on write. Think of it like this. You have to build the shelves before you put the books away. You define the structure up front. But with a data lake, it's schema on read. You just toss everything in a big pile, and only when you go to read the data do you figure out how to make sense of it. This makes lakes way cheaper and much more flexible, which is exactly what data scientists love for exploring and experimenting.
So, okay, problem solved, right? We have a lake for the messy stuff and a warehouse for the clean stuff. Perfect. Well, not so fast. For a while, companies tried to run both side by side. Use the lake for the wild, raw data and machine learning, and the warehouse for the official business reports. But this two-system approach, it created a whole new world of problems. And here's what that mess looked like. They called it a two-tier architecture. Basically, data had to make two stops. First, it gets dumped into the data lake. Then you'd have to pull some of it out, clean it up, transform it, and then load it again into the data warehouse. So now you have 2 copies of your data and the super complicated, slow, and fragile process just to keep them from getting out of sync. It was not ideal. And this setup led to some really big, really painful problems. 4 of them, in fact. First, reliability went out the window. Trying to keep 2 giant data systems in sync is just asking for errors. Second, the data was always stale. By the time the data made it to the warehouse for reports, it could be hours or even days old. Third, your advanced tools, like for machine learning, couldn't easily get to the nice, clean data that was locked away in the warehouse. And finally, the cost. You're paying to store the data twice and paying for all the complex plumbing to move it between the two. Super expensive. So all these problems got people thinking, what if you didn't have to choose? What if you could get the cheap, flexible storage of a data lake and the powerful, reliable features of a data warehouse all in one system? Well, that's the big idea behind the next step in our story, the Data Lakehouse. At its heart, the Lakehouse is all about getting rid of that 2-system nightmare. The goal is to build all those useful, important features from the data warehouse, things like reliable transactions, data quality checks, fast indexing, and put them directly on top of the cheap and flexible storage you get with a data lake. One system to rule them all, basically. And look at how much simpler this picture is. It's all about simplification. That separate data warehouse, poof, it's gone. Now everybody, from the business analysts running reports to the data scientists building machine learning models, can go to the exact same place to get their data. No more moving data around, no more duplicates, and no more stale reports. So how does this magic actually work? Well, it's basically 3 key things. First, you add this clever metadata layer right on top of your data lake. This is what gives you those classic database features, like ACID transactions. All that means is that your data operations are reliable, they either finish completely or not at all, so you don't end up with corrupted data. Second, it uses smart tricks like caching and indexing to make searching through all that data super fast, just like a warehouse. And third, and this is the big one, it gives everyone direct access to that single source of data. Okay, so we've got the warehouse, the lake, and the lakehouse. With all these options on the table, how in the world does a company pick the right one? Let's make this real and look at some actual use cases. It really breaks down like this. If you're a company like Netflix or Uber, and your whole business revolves around analyzing huge, constant streams of raw data for things like recommendations or tracking drivers in real time, a pure data lake is your best bet. If your main goal is creating perfect, standardized financial reports for the CEO, a traditional data warehouse is still a solid, reliable choice. But if you're an organization that needs to do both of those things, you want one single source of truth for your business reports and your advanced data science, that's where the Lakehouse really shines. And just so you know, we're not talking about small potatoes here. Getting your data strategy right can have a massive payoff. Take a look at Nestlé. By building out a data lake, they were able to create a sales recommendation tool for their team. The result? A staggering $200 million in new business value. That's the power of unlocking your data. So what's the big takeaway here? There is no one-size-fits-all answer. There's no magic bullet. The best system isn't always the newest or the trendiest. It all comes down to what your business actually needs. What are your goals? What kind of data are you working with? Answering those questions is what's going to point you to the right strategy. And that really leaves us with a fascinating question for the future. As the amount of data in the world just keeps exploding, what's next? Is the future this single, unified lakehouse system that does everything for everyone? Or is it something else entirely? Like this idea of a data mesh, where things get more decentralized and different teams own their own little pieces of the data puzzle. One thing's for sure, this story is far from over.